Good morning. Good morning. I'll stand over here. This is a bit easier. Good morning. I'm John McEwen. I'm the Executive Director of the New Jersey Theater Alliance, and I thank you so much for joining us for our annual Cultural Access Summit. It's also nice to say that we're basically sold out. This is the largest crowd we've had in the 14 years or so that we've been doing this program. So I'd like to first start by just giving you a brief visual description of myself. I'm a white cis male standing about 5'11", with brown and gray hair parted on the side, mustache and goatee. I'm wearing today a baby blue shirt with a green tie and navy suit, and I have glasses with clear eye frames and bright blue leg frames. And I won't give you my age. We're going to skip that part. So we're so grateful to Gary Schneider, Lauren Shepard, Sam Wang, and everyone here at Grounds for Sculpture for their amazing support and partnership each year. Thank you for sharing your beautiful venue with us. It always makes for such a special day. For 33 years, we have partnered with the New Jersey State Council on the Arts to ensure that our arts community is accessible to audiences, artists, and managers. We are delighted to work with Lindsay Dandio, Program Officer and the Council's Access Coordinator, on several projects, including the Council's Community of Practice for the Service Organizations and the Cultural Access Network. It's my pleasure to introduce my colleague, Lindsay Dandio. Lindsay?
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, John. It's such a pleasure to work with you as well. To provide a visual description of myself, I am a white woman in my late 40s. I have dark brown hair just beyond shoulder length. Today, I'm wearing a peach-colored, long-sleeved blouse with a flower pattern and black dress pants. I'm also wearing light blue glasses and peach-colored pearl earrings. So in my role, I work to ensure and improve accessibility within the New Jersey State Council on the Arts, ensure that the Council's grantee organizations are accessible, and to help provide support to the greater field. I'm joined today by our Executive Director, Allison Tratner, and several Council colleagues here to learn and take part in the day's activities. We're also excited to be here today. Since stepping into this role just over a year ago, it's been a great joy to help foster the amazing work that is being done within New Jersey's arts and cultural community to provide accessibility. An important factor in the success of that work has been the knowledge, support, and resources coming from the Cultural Access Network, also known as CAN. The Arts Council deeply values our partnership with the New Jersey Theater Alliance and CAN as we work together to ensure the field's continual progress in making the arts accessible to all New Jerseyans. One of the critical services of CAN is to provide educational sessions to help the cultural community get the knowledge it needs to create welcoming, accessible experiences. In fiscal year 25, CAN held 6 Access Thursday roundtables on topics ranging from making visual arts organizations accessible, to access as a partnership between the host organization and venue, to sensory-friendly experiences, and more. In these virtual sessions, peer arts organizations with best practices and patrons and advocates with disabilities shared their expertise in specific topic areas, fostering learning and leadership among colleagues. CAN also provided accessibility awareness training for organizations and an audio description and sensory seminar workshop training series. CAN's webpage provided an abundance of resources, including self-assessment tools, disability-specific New Jersey and national resources, and online templates to help organizations improve accessibility within their policies, procedures, programs, facilities, and more. While ensuring that patrons have access to arts programs is critical, This morning's education session will address an equally significant area, hiring and engaging artists and art workers with disabilities. The panel's collective experience draws from multiple disciplines and roles within the visual and performing arts. The Arts Council applauds the progress that the New Jersey's arts organizations continue to make, not just to achieve compliance with regulations, but to go beyond, prioritizing access to ensure that their programs feel welcoming to everyone. Thanks to the Cultural Access Network and the expertise of its dedicated committee members, we can all continue to learn together and increase accessibility in the arts. Thank you for your commitment. I'm delighted to be here with you today.
Just a little housekeeping item. Who's ever working the PowerPoint, can you just go back to the title slide? Thank you. And we'll just stay with this slide for the rest of the morning. Thanks so much. Thank you, Lindsay. Each year at the Cultural Access Summit, we begin our morning session with an educational opportunity to have dialogue with each other, learn and build awareness around a specific issue of access, to strengthen our commitment to and advance our journey towards becoming more welcoming, accessible, and inclusive to audience, artists, and arts workers. The actress Emma Thompson once said, "Being disabled should not mean being disqualified from having access to every aspect of life." This is true in every element of living, including employment, as arts workers and artists. I'm so looking forward to hearing from today's panel and learning about challenges faced by artists and arts workers with disabilities, considerations for employers, and ideas about expanding employment opportunities in the arts. Moderating today's panel is Zalopany. We are thrilled to welcome Madison Zalopany. Madison is an access worker, artist, and cultural critic. In these roles, they foster cross-disability solidarity, support access logistics, and operate from an anti-ableist framework. They have worked with institutions such as the Guggenheim Museum, the Museum of Modern Art, Laundromat Project, Storm King Art Center, and United States artists. Their work experience includes acting as the Whitney Museum's Coordinator of Access and Community Programs, the Director of Community Programs and Partnerships at the Nelson Atkins Museum, and most recently, the lead access coordinator for the beloved disability culture event series, I Want to Be With You Everywhere. I want to thank Cultural Access Network committee member and Director of Hands-On, Beth Prevor, for introducing us to Madison. Please help me welcome Madison, who will introduce our panel. Madison? Join us up at the table.
All right, good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for the wonderful introduction. I am so excited to be here today. My name is Madison Zalopany. I will visually describe myself as a white person with slicked back blonde hair, and I am wearing a sort of navy blue matching set of a shirt and skirt. And we are just getting settled in as our panels are joining us.
Oh, what?
Oh, no, so I'm going to people were just, I'm going to visually describe what was happening. Bojana was entering the panel area, and so I was just letting her pass by. I am going to introduce our amazing panel today, and I'd like to kind of go one by one and greet people and let them talk a little bit about their artistic practice. And maybe we'll start with Neve. Okay. Since you're in the hot seat next to me, right?
Are you going to read the thing?
Yes.
Okay, all right, cool.
So Neve, they, he, and sometimes she in a gay way, is a multidisciplinary, and I'm going to totally butcher this word,
Terpsichorean.
Thank you for the assist.
It's from the, oh my God, this is very loud. It's from the Greek muse Terpsichore, who's the, this is so nerdy, y'all, who is the muse of dance and lyrical poetry.
Very gorgeous, descriptive. A fabulist of the stage, street, page, field, stream, and screen. They are punk, an anarcho-communist, a moon fairy, an indigenous creature, and a disability justice activist. He is a recipient of the Pina Bausch Award for Dance and Choreography, the Disability Futures Fellowship, the ARC Artist Fellowship for Indigenous Creators, and the Art Matters Foundation Artist to Artist Award. Neve creates weird, sexy, hysterical, frightening, lush, lyric performance art to further their goals of ethical and responsible interstellar travel and the liberation of all things, of all beings, excuse me. Welcome.
Thank you so much. I love you, Madison, and I really appreciate you reading that slightly absurd bio. I think it makes a lot more sense in words on the page than in the, hearing it out loud. I'm like, okay, that was reading a very dense text. So thank you for getting through that with me. Basically, I just want us all to have a good time and be kind to each other and be as weird as we want to be as long as we're not hurting each other. My name is Neve. My pronouns are they, he, and she. My visual description is that I am a mixed Black, Indigenous, and white non-binary person with kind of a feminine bent. I have got a black fairy mullet hairstyle, business in the front and party in the back is the vibe, but like some shaggy on the sides. I'm wearing a 3/4 length sleeved dress, little mini dress with some swaths of multicolors, mostly blue and gold and orange, like a sunset. I have facial tattoos that look like antenna and a neck tattoo that looks like a green ribbon. If you know, you know. So, yeah. Am I supposed to say more than my visual description?
I wonder if you would talk a little bit about what you do as an artist. Give us a little snippet of your art practice.
Sure, you didn't completely understand what I do by reading my bio?
Oh, I'm sorry.
That was super accessible and straightforward. Okay. I am a performance artist. I would say like a dramatic comedian. I like to make people laugh and cry. I am an actor, singer, dancer, writer, and right now I've just been really deepening my breathing practice around how I sing and orate.
Incredible.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bryan Woolbert is a fully independent pianist, vocalist, songwriter, producer, and live sound engineer from Egg Harbor Township, New Jersey. Legally blind from birth, Woolbert uses his God-given gifts of perfect pitch and chromesthesia to comprehend and compose music completely by ear. He has been performing music for nearly 20 years in many genres and styles, ranging from classic pop rock to contemporary, from Christian praise to new age, country, jazz, soundtrack, and much more. Woolbert acquired production knowledge through high school and collegiate studies, as well as through multiple DAW certification training programs. Today, Woolbert produces many of his own songs at his home studio. Welcome, Bryan. Would you like to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your artistic practice?
Sure. Thank you so much, Madison. Wow, that is loud. We're going to back up. I like it, though. Nice and strong. So yes, my name is Bryan Woolbert. Visual description, I'm a white male. I'm wearing a navy blue suit with a black satin bow tie, white dress shirt. And yeah, pretty much what she said. My main occupation is performing piano and vocals. Right now, you can catch me at the Tropicana Firewater Saloon on Saturday nights usually. So if you're looking for something fun to do in Atlantic City on a Saturday night, come see me. It'll be an absolute blast. Other than that, in the background, I do write my own music. We're working on producing a bunch of that. And I do have the capacity to run live sound. I got to do that during college for a traveling band that went all over Pennsylvania and even up to Binghamton, New York. So that was a lot of fun. And yeah, it's pretty much what I do.
Gorgeous. All right, next up is Alex Dolores Salerno, who is an interdisciplinary artist based in Lenapehoking, or Brooklyn, New York. Their practice is informed by queer Crip community and the radical shifts necessary to center interdependence and nurture connections to the earth. Salerno received their MFA in Fine Arts from Parsons School of Design and their BS in Studio Art from Skidmore College. They exhibit nationally and internationally and have been awarded a Win Newhouse Award and the Art Matters Foundation Artist to Artist Fellowship. Their work has been featured by press and publishers such as Art in America, NYU Press, Panorama, Journal of the Association of Historians of American Art, All Arts, and Hyperallergic. Salerno is currently participating in the LMCC Workspace Residency at Lower Manhattan Cultural Council and the NY4CA Artists Advocates Residence. Welcome, Alex.
Thank you, Madison. Okay, what do? I'm an artist and an access worker, but I often like to just say artist because I like to think that that can cover all of it, and a lot of what I do is talking about how art and access can be one, and talking about access as artistry as well. So generally, I like to think that artists can cover it all. I'm getting used to the microphone. Okay, visual description. I'm a white Latinx person. I have dark brown hair just below my shoulders. I'm wearing a black mask because I'm COVID conscious. I have a black shirt on from the activist group ACT UP, and it says silence equals death. And the pink triangle is a watermelon. On top is a black blazer. And I have my black crutches with me. And yeah, that's all for now, I think. Thank you so much. I'm really happy to be here.
Gorgeous. And last but not least, we have Bojana Coklyat, who is a disabled artist and a William Fulbright alumni and previous project leader at NYC Museum Arts and Cultural Access Consortium, or MAC. In 2019, she curated Crip Imponderabilia, the first gallery exhibit at NYC centering all disabled artists in disability culture. Around this time, she began collaborating with Finnegan Shannon on the Alt Text as Poetry project. This included facilitating workshops at Twitter, Google, and MIT. Recently, Bojana has taken on the position of associate producer on the film funded by the American Foundation for the Blind, featuring a variety of different people in the blind community. Bojana is also currently the manager of access programs at the Whitney Museum of American Art. Welcome, Bojana.
Hi, wow, what a panel. I'm so honored to be a part of this panel and hear all the cool things that other people are doing. So I am a white woman with long blonde hair. I decided to wear these very dangly earrings. It's kind of like a gold chain with pearls. I'm realizing one may have lost some pieces. One's longer than the other, but that's okay. I'm wearing a black shirt. I don't know if I've already said I'm a smiley person. I give off, I think, a warm vibe. I use she, her pronouns. And I also just want to say I have known about the New Jersey Cultural Access Network for a very long time. I think it was in 2009 or 2010 I first met John, and I was actually honored as an artist at that time. And so it's just really, really cool to come back to this event and to come here with all of my experience that I've had over the past 10 or so years. Actually, oh my gosh, it's like 15 years. Actually, the New Jersey Cultural Access Network actually really helped me get my first understanding of access. It's been a long journey of understanding access, not just as something that is based, through the lens of compliance, but something going back to what Alex said, like how can we look at access as part of artistry, look at access as a creative layer. I love that thought process. And that really is a part of my artistic practice with Alt Texas Poetry. Me and Finnegan Shannon, we approach it as an art project, not as a workshop or as consulting, but basically Alt Texas Poetry is a project where we share and create spaces to learn about writing alt text in more expressive and creative ways. And alt text is a type of image description, and it's used mostly for people who are blind or living with low vision. So yeah, I think that in that we've really been thinking about how is access just part of the process along with creativity. And yeah, I'm excited to have a conversation with everybody.
Well, thank you so much. I think that segues kind of perfectly into maybe one of the first topics of discussion. We are all here because we are in the arts and we believe in accessibility. I know a lot of people here on the panel wear a lot of different hats, but I'm wondering, as disabled artists, if you could talk a little bit about first, what do institutions get right, or organizations, or people, or projects? What has gone well? What have you experienced working with a cultural org, and access was really honored? And this is open to the group, so have at it.
I could take that first. So, the organization that primarily helped me was MAVIS, the Music Association for Visually Impaired Students. They were a 501c3 nonprofit. They were a Lion State project, and they existed for exactly 50 years. Sadly, some things have gone on. We lost the president a couple years ago, so the organization has sort of gone its own way, if you will. But nonetheless, during my life and also during my mother's life, she was also a musician. It had a tremendous impact. So they subsidized music lessons, instruments, and those sorts of things, especially for children at an early age who were disabled, mainly in the blind and visually impaired community, to help them get started with their music career. And they also, would help teachers to understand the needs of a blind and visually impaired music student, such as, they're going to need to learn by ear, they're going to need to maybe mimic a line or two, and that's how they're going to learn initially. And that's how I started. I took piano lessons at age 7, and Mavis, was a tremendous help in that. And so they did a tremendous amount for me over the years. What started as just piano lessons turned into providing performance opportunities, as big as performing on the grand piano at the 6th floor of Bally's in Atlantic City. So that was awesome. And then, they also even subsidized 1 or 2 of my studio sessions when I desperately needed some help to finish producing my You Are With Me EP, which is now on Apple Music, Spotify, and all those. You can check it out. So Mavis was instrumental in my life. They were even instrumental, as I said, in my mother's life. When she was much younger, she was sort of a member at the very beginning of the organization. She played guitar and she sang, and so they did a tremendous amount for her too, starting with lessons and all that sort of thing. So kudos to Mavis. They did a lot for me. They did a lot for a lot of other blind and visually impaired people throughout the state of New Jersey. So I would say that's what went well for me.
I can add to that conversation. For the 2024 biennial at the Whitney, something that was really cool is we had several disabled artists featured in the biennial that year. And one of the concerns of some of these disabled artists was they wanted to be able to celebrate and congregate with people, but they did not feel safe doing it inside the museum space, just because they are also very COVID conscious. So we started to think about, well, what could we do? What could we create? What kind of space could we have outside? So we kind of had this access lounge, which was right outside the entrance of the Whitney, and so we set up a space with a bunch of chairs. We had hot chocolate. It just became a place for people to congregate, and it kind of became like the super cool space to hang out in. And it was just our little access lounge. So that was really successful. People could drop in, come back and forth. And so, I think that was something that was really cool. We had to work with security at the Whitney, facilities, also some people in the education department. There was a lot of different departments that had to come together to make that possible, and it really was super successful, and it created a space where people could come together and feel like they could also celebrate and not worry. So that felt really successful, and I hope to do it again for the next biennial.
I just want to echo, I was there and it was done really well, and it was really appreciated because so many cultural organizations have abandoned their COVID safety protocols. And it was just nice to be somewhere that was celebratory and party outside in a way that felt very disability friendly and COVID conscious. So I just wanted to.
And it was unseasonably warm, which was great.
But I think you also had heaters, which is
yes.
nice.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
That feels like I can segue into that, because my most accessible, successful experience of performing and being hosted was also by the Whitney and Performance Space New York. But the reason for that, I believe, was because incredible disabled artists like Madison and Bojana and many other people have created a kind of official, unofficial collective who have operated this incredible disability arts festival called I Want to Be With You Everywhere, after the lesser known singer in Fleetwood Mac's song I Want to Be With You Everywhere. And it was done with so much collaboration, and I think that that is part of what made it so successful, is that, and I can't speak to the organizers' perspective, but I can just say it seemed to me that no one was doing too much, and so people had really clear responsibilities, and so everyone felt very available. Getting there as an artist performing, there were a lot of people there to talk to me and ask me what I needed. There was a little lounge that was kind of a down space, like you can chill, you can be in a darker space if you're overstimulated by the light, by the noise, kind of a quieter space with bean bags and comfy stuff. There were these incredible vibrating vests that you could wear if you wanted to as a kind of like tactile and sound assist for experiencing vibrations in the space of performances. There were ASL interpreters, there was CART, live captioning, there was audio descriptions. The audio describers were also disabled. So there was just like so many levels of nuance. And it's, I don't know, I guess it feels kind of ironic to me because New York City is also the place where I've experienced the most inaccessibility just structurally as a wheelchair user, and particularly as a wheelchair using dancer, but it is also the place where I got my start in dance. Like I began formally dancing with Def Dance Jam Workshop in 1998 when I was 8, just to age myself, and that in Harlem. And so my introduction to dance was with the perception that it was this accessible medium, that it was a medium for everyone and for everybody. And then, of course, high school came around and that illusion was kind of dispelled for me, where I was then in the wider world of dance and musical theater and performance, and people didn't have room for bodies like mine on stage particularly. Because I think a lot of times when there is accessibility for performance, it's thinking about the audience and not about the performers ourselves. But that was what was so great about I Want to Be With You Everywhere, was that it was equally performers and audience being considered as all part of this performance experience ecosystem. Yes.
I think a lot of what I'm hearing and agreeing with is creating spaces to create and support community through collaboration. And I feel like collaboration is like the big word that I'm resonating with here. And rather than kind of mention a specific event or space in particular, I think that it's kind of speaking more generally and from a perspective of a worker who kind of pops in and out of all kinds of cultural spaces, rather than like stay at one space for a long time. I feel like most supported, and I feel like a space really works when I can kind of just like show up as I am as a person. I think that is often done best in disability community. And I do find that when I show up to a space, even if it's like a Zoom meeting, that hasn't really thought through accessibility or access, or just like the fact that we're all people with needs, the vibe is really different. And there seems to be this expectation for some kind of performance or some kind of rule following some kind of normative way of interacting and relating with each other. But when we kind of just make space, especially at the beginning, for just like kind of saying like, what do we need? How are we showing up? And kind of just approaching each other with that, what is the word, ethos of care and collaboration, like things really do change.
And I think it's a relief too, like to know that you can come into a space and be like, I am not feeling well today, or I'm really tired, I need to put my head down, or I need to eat something right now, and to know like that you won't be judged and that people just understand. I think that's just a relief, like to know that that understanding just already exists and that you don't have to be the one to explain and set that up, just for it to already be set up is, just I think a huge relief and a comfort. It makes you feel welcome, which is I think really important.
There's a lot of vigorous nodding throughout the table, and also a lot of smiles and giggles because we're all relating. I also really appreciate what you're saying about access not always being tidy. Like, I think a lot of people think about access as like check boxes and compliance lists and things that you have policies and procedures, and we're not anti-policies, like, well, maybe we are, but but a lot of times I agree. I've been the most comfortable in spaces where the access is kind of like messy and kind of organic and collaborative was the word Alex used, which I think is great. So we started off on kind of a positive note. I wonder if we could also talk a little bit about very common barriers that you've experienced as disabled artists. And they could be financial, physical, social, whatever barriers come to mind.
Sure. I could take this. I would say, at least for me as a legally blind person, by far the largest barrier in my music career is transportation. We can't drive. And I am looking forward to the day when Sir Elon is going to drop self-driving cars, because I hope they also make, like a self-driving cargo van to put the keyboard in. That would be great. But long story short, right now, I have to pay a professional driver to transport me and my equipment to a gig. Very fortunately, I'm thankful that I now have a cargo van that I co-own. Of course, I cannot drive it, but I do own it, and I could put my equipment in there. And so basically, I just need to pay somebody to take me to the venue and load the equipment into the venue. And that's great, but, the venue isn't going to cover that. So, it's up to me to address that. So what I've been doing, is sort of increasing the invoice to meet the price line of whatever that driver charges, and it depends on the distance to the venue. It depends on all those types of factors. But I would say for me, absolutely, that is by far the biggest barrier. And then of course there's, navigating venues, things like that. Some venues are easier than others, and especially as musicians, when we work at night, it can be a little more challenging, right? So one of the things that I thought of, or a couple things, I work at Tropicana Atlantic City, which is an awesome venue. It's a cool place. But, one of the things that they could do in the valet entrance, would be to have like a handicap loading area, so that, handicap artists, musicians could load equipment into the venue, or this way they would be prioritized. Also the same thing for Uber and Lyft pickup. I think one of the hardest things, because sometimes I'll go there to perform professionally. Other times I've done karaoke there at the Planet Rose nightclub. That's a lot of fun too. But one of the fun things is when it's 1 o'clock in the morning and you're going out there and you're looking for your Uber car in the sea of other cars. That could be a big challenge for a legally blind or visually impaired person. So, and I'm thinking in the future as well, when we do have self-driving cars, right, they are going to come and pick us up. One of the coolest things would be, sort of a handicapped space, in that valet entrance or wherever pick-up and drop-off is, so that, handicapped people could be able to access that easier. Another thought I had too, navigating venues when you're in a big casino like Tropicana or like Ocean Casino in Atlantic City. There's a lot of big signs and billboards that can direct you where to go, but if you're a legally blind person, maybe you can't see that sign pretty far away, right? So something that I've thought about, with the advent of AR glasses, now that we're getting into the AI and AR age, it would be really cool if some of those banner signs had technology in them that could communicate with AR glasses, maybe some type of universal standard, similar to that which is used for smart devices. They have Matter for Amazon, Google, and Apple HomeKit, maybe a universal standard that goes across brands for AR glasses that would communicate with the device so that the legally blind or visually impaired person would receive auditory feedback, letting them know this is what that sign says, this is where you are inside the building. The GPS can get you to the building, but it's probably not going to guide you through the big building. So that would be a really cool thing too.
I feel like maybe, I don't know, we're starting to answer in the same order, but it's not something that I was told to do previously, so it's just happening organically. Yeah, because I was excited about what Bryan was saying, and I relate, actually, I was probably at first gonna say, thinking about the accessibility of stages and of being hosted when I'm, say, staying somewhere that I don't live. Where am I going to stay? If it's a Airbnb or someone's house, is it actually wheelchair accessible? But I really think that transportation for me as well is the number one thing. As a person who cannot operate my feet and legs the same way many other people do, I do need a car with hand controls to operate both gas and brakes, and I do not own one of those. There is not an abundance of them for testing and trying out in the country or the world. There's generally very specific agencies that even have the practice of letting people, try out their cars as a part of their permit getting process. And you have to pay for every single session that you're driving that car. For van driving, there's, the closest accessible van permit training service. I'm those words are all very awkward, but you're getting the idea, I think. The closest one to me is in Delaware State. And so that's just one little piece of that puzzle. But as an actor, especially, and as a dancer who gets sometimes brought to different places, I'm always looking at the list of things that they're willing to provide, the institutions are willing to provide, because the biggest thing is, are you going to cover air travel or bus travel, train travel, car travel, etc.? And on top of that, are you willing to cover the accessible accommodations? Because unfortunately, on airplanes still, there isn't just an accessible option, right? There's just Comfort Plus or something that you can upgrade to give you more legroom, which is something that's required by a lot of physically disabled people, even if we are not bougie and affluent, So it's we're still at this moment where a lot of accessible accommodations have to be bought and are a sign of privilege or luxury, even though there are some things, right, that make things easier. You can, if you're legally disabled and you have a disabled parking placard, if you have a car, if you have a place that you can get into, right, all of that not being guaranteed, then you can park in a lot of places. Not everywhere you want, I want to make that clear. Some people have the mistaken opinion that you can park anywhere you want. You still can't park in the red and yellow zones, but you can park a lot more places. And I like to joke that that's one of the many privileges that I enjoy in this country as a disabled person, is that if I can manage to get in a car, then I can park anywhere I want and wait outside of the building I can't get into. And it's great. So I would say that like that is the biggest, like transportation, thinking about what kind of transportation it is, what accessible accommodations are even available to that transportation, and even just having someone with me. Like if I need, a lot of times, so much of what inaccessibility is for people with physical disabilities, sensory disabilities, so many things that affects our spatial relationship to space and other people, is that it's unpredictable. Like inaccessibility, you can plan for it, you can comply with all of these things. As Madison said, you can check the boxes off, right? But that doesn't mean that if something organically weird happens, you'll be prepared for everything, right? Disabled people, we're always late to everything, but we also have to plan like so many hours in advance, like have to think about being monstrously early, and I'm still late, you know what I mean? Because of all of the things that can go wrong, and not even go wrong in a disastrous way, just go wrong in a kind of normal way, you know? And yeah, I feel like that's what I run into a lot, is needing to plan and not always having the availability to plan. Something about I Want to Be With You Everywhere that was really cool was that there was I was flying from Seattle to New York, and I was able to bring my partner with me to do access support for me 24/7. And I was also like, we were accompanied in being ferried from place to place. So we were never like totally on our own. Because there is strength in numbers. Yeah.
And I know we're talking about this maybe through the lens of mainly transportation, but we're also kind of talking about what's commonly referred to as like the disability tax, of like, because the world is so inaccessible, there's all these other costs that disabled folks have to pay out, right? And so having these institutions think about access holistically is really what makes access possible. Sorry, I just wanted to kind of say that explicitly.
May I respond to that?
Yeah.
Yeah, you know, and with the disability tax also comes the challenge, as especially as like an independent, you know, musician like I am, you know, of still being competitively priced too. You know, it definitely is a challenge to not only, you know, account for that, but to maintain competitiveness in the field. So it's definitely a challenge, and it's something that you know, something to work on, I guess, together, you know.
I'll talk about my own disability tax as well. Because now hearing everyone talk about transportation, I'm like, yeah, that's also my disability tax. For similar and different reasons. I use mobility aids mostly for energy and pain. So while I might be able to navigate a subway, I can't do it every day, or I can't do it multiple days in a row. So when I do these artist residencies that require a loose requirement of a certain number of hours in the studio a week, I just can't do that. And when I go to the studio, a lot of the time I have to take Ubers there. And so I'm basically having to pay hundreds and hundreds of dollars to participate in something that doesn't pay me to begin with. And a lot of the times, the people who run the residencies don't actually know that I'm paying all this money, and everyone else isn't. So I've started doing this thing where at the beginning of artist residencies, I say, hey, you know that for me to participate as much as everyone else, I have to pay hundreds, if not like maybe $1,000 more than everyone else. I work freelance, I'm an artist. I don't know where am I going to get that money? And also, this residency isn't paying me. So it's been kind of like trial and error. So after like one residency where I realized, okay, this is not sustainable, the next residency I went to, I said, hey, this is the deal. And what the result of that was that this residency set aside a travel fund for all of the residents, not just me. The following residency I did, I said, hey, this is the deal. I'm going to have to pay all this money. The result was no support. So, yeah, the disability tax is probably one of the biggest barriers. There's an arts organization in New York called Recess, and a few years ago, they made something called a Care and Capacity Fund. So I've been kind of pointing out this idea of a care and capacity fund to everywhere. So now I can go to a residency and say, hey, this is something that your colleagues are doing. This might be something to implement because there's this thing called the disability tax, and this is how much I have to pay to attend this residency. So there's that. Transportation's big. Another thing that, regarding barriers, my original answer was also kind of having to do with what I was talking about earlier about this idea of like the performance of normalcy. And I think that part of that performance is this idea of how long things are supposed to take or expected to take. And if something surpasses this, what is this word? Like this social construction of an idea of an acceptable professional amount of time, then there's kind of like social consequences. And I was talking to Madison earlier about how I think we're always saying sorry, like, sorry, I followed up with you a day late. I'm like, what are we sorry for? Like, what if that was just totally fine? Like, actually, like, we should thank each other for taking care of ourselves.
I'd like to piggyback on something that you said here too, which is that, as far as the social aspect of it is concerned, for legally blind people, one of the other barriers, we can't make eye contact. We can do our very best, or maybe one or two of us can, but I certainly can't. It's definitely a challenge, and especially, in the field, because when you go to greet that manager for the first time, they want to see your eyes. They want to, make eye contact with you. It's like this, very important thing, and we just can't do that. So, that's why, I try to mention it to them ahead of time. I do put it in my technical rider. Do you guys have technical riders? Do you guys have those for? Yeah. Yeah, right. So, I always try to mention it in as many places as I can to where they're well informed. But one of the things that they sometimes wonder about is like, why isn't he making eye contact? It's like, I can't do that,
Yeah, I mean, I think that I was thinking about like a barrier for me is how much our society values vision, right? It's like at the top of the sensory hierarchy, and yes. To see is to know. Like people think to see is to know, to have intelligence, to have knowledge about something. I think that's how people think, and you might say, "I see what you mean," right? So I think I have noticed that as an issue, to not be living in that world and to not have that as your most important sense. It's just not in alignment with the rest of with most of society. And I think what I've run into is, if I want to, it's a couple of times in publishing something, like writing a chapter, they want images. And I'm like, well, why am I gonna have images in this book when those aren't accessible? I'm all about like writing an image description. I want to just submit an image description. Like why not flip that, way of thinking like that why not have that as important as an image? Like, why do we need an image, right? Like, that's the big question that I ask. Is an image really important and necessary? Or I had also been interviewed in a magazine, an art magazine, and Madison's laughing. It was with like 3 other blind artists, and the magazine issue was not accessible to people who were blind. Like, it was not like, and I was like, wow, that's wild. But like, I think that's another thing. Like, image poverty is a real thing for people who are blind or living with low vision, and not having access to images, and that can be in the arts. And like, just think if like, you were a young kid and you never had access to the images that you may have had when you were little, either through books or going to a museum or whatever it might be. And how does that affect somebody who's young as an artist who's blind, right? Like, not having access to that kind of information. And there's really another great blind activist, creator, worker, Chancey Fleet. And Chancey Fleet is really at the head of, she's a real leader in, talking about ending image poverty for people who are blind. They have a Dimensions Lab in New York at the Andrew High School Library, and they create all kinds of tactile prints, swell form prints, embossed prints of different images so that people who are blind or living with low vision can feel images and feel the composition of drawings or maps, a variety of different things, and even make their own. So I think that's like, just not like, as an artist, like not always having access to those kinds of things, to know what other people are creating, that can be an issue. It's so disappointing if I'm on, online, and different artists or people I look up to don't have image description of their images, and I'm talking about like other disabled artists, because I want to know what they're creating, and they don't have image description. Like, that to me is a real barrier, because I don't know what other people are creating. I don't, we as artists, we're creating in an ecosystem, right? Like, we didn't just like all of a sudden pop out and have all these ideas, right? Like, we are in an ecosystem. There's collaboration. There's like a lot of exchange of ideas, and I think when you can't have that exchange of ideas because you don't know what is being created, I think that's a limit. That's really limiting.
Something that could be really cool, at least in a small bit that could help. I would love to see AI-generated alt text on websites, in applications. I think that could be tremendously helpful, especially if there were a universal standard for that, maybe a standard model or a group of models that could work together to provide that type of image description when it's not created by the website developer or app developer. And I know this because, I created my own website using Weebly, or they call it Square now. And so I'm always having to put all of the alt text up there for all of my images, and of course I do. But I would love to see AI play a part in that, because it could, make it more accessible for everybody while also making it easier for web developers and app developers, especially when there's just tons and tons of images, that you would have to provide a description for every single one of those, right? So, I feel like it would just help everyone if that could, become a reality.
Well, there is AI-generated alt text, and unfortunately, like, something I talk about with alt text as poetry is with AI-generated alt text, at least right now, it can be very, doesn't really capture the image. Like, for it's an example that I use as far as AI-generated alt text. It was a picture of a jack-o'-lantern, and it's like, a jack-o'-lantern, it's a pumpkin, it's been carved, like there's a candle glowing inside, there's like autumnal leaves around it, and like the AI-generated alt text said one face. Because that's what the AI generated. It was like, oh, this is a face, right? But like that doesn't capture like what it actually is. Or even when alt text does kind of capture, you know, an image, it could be like a really cute cat, like, you know, like it looks like it's like on a keyboard and it's a kitten, right? But like if it just says a cat, you know, like on top of a keyboard, it doesn't really capture maybe the charm of the image. Like there's something missing, especially I think if we're talking about art. You know, I just think like right now, AI generated alt text without like some human intervention it can be really lackluster. Although I think that that is changing. I just don't know what the application would be to like websites and alt text. Like I definitely still think we don't, you know, I also don't want to just say, well, we don't have human, you know, we as people don't have to worry about access. We'll just give it to AI. I think that's a little tricky, a little, you know, like where that's a slippery slope to then just not say, well, we don't need you to be responsible for it. Yeah.
I agree with a lot of what you're saying, and I just want to also kind of bring it back to an earlier part of the conversation that was like about collaboration and thinking about how access has to live in everything, right? And so when you're thinking about access, a lot of times in cultural institutions, it's one person or like a team of people in one department, and they are responsible to be the expert on everything, which is just not realistic. What if we socialize the responsibility of image descriptions and alt text? And I honestly find a lot of joy and pleasure in writing alt text and image descriptions. It makes me think about, what am I posting and why is this a special image? So I think there's a lot to be said about having those skills, but it can be a yes and, right? We can have a little mix and match of AI and human and see what we get, you know?
Yeah. You know, and I think that, you know, I agree that I've seen some of the AI responses that are just lackluster. I mean, it's true. You know, and that's why, you know, in those types of situations, you know, we need new models or we need larger language models. So, you know, the technology is, whether anyone admits it or not, still in its early stages. I also can't help it because I'm like this tech nerd and I like to push things forward and, you know, but no, I agree that you know, some of the descriptions definitely, you know, need some improvement and definitely lack some of the character and the beauty of the artwork. And so I think that, you know, for different applications, depending on where the image is, you know, maybe also some options of different models. And I also love the idea of the community contributed alt text, although maybe some sort of stamp of approval would need to be on there so that people on the internet aren't just writing random things like, you know, when there's the image of the cat on the keyboard, that they're not writing a fireplace instead, you know, something like that, right? So, you know, maybe some kind of universal standard for that as well.
I'm wondering, because we're talking a lot about kind of access and whose responsibility it is, and you know, I see a lot of times that disabled artists will be invited into an art space, and they will be invited in as an artist, but then also kind of take on the hat of access worker or access consultant. And I'm wondering if you might talk about some of those experiences and maybe whether or not they worked for you, or maybe why that might not always be an appropriate ask as a disabled artist.
Sure. I really can't decide what distance from my mouth this mic needs to be. It's really, I'm doing this constant dance of pushing it forward and pulling it back to me, and then kind of, you know, so. Yeah, does that sound good? That sounds.
I think so.
Okay, cool.
It looks great.
Great. It looks good.
It looks
so.
That's what matters.
in our visual centered society, right? Yeah. Well, okay. Here I am. So yes, that's been a constant experience of the kind of unspoken or uncommunicated, unarticulated, to use non-bodily sensory specific words. Like, message is that I should know as a disabled artist that part of like the social disability tax that I'm paying is that if I want to be included, they're doing something for me by including me. Therefore, what I have to pay back is making the experience accessible for other people. And because I am an activist, because I am a disability rights and disability justice educator and advocate, I want to do that. I will never stop wanting to do that. I do not want things to be accessible only for me, only for the disabilities that I have, only for my individual needs, because for me, the most beautiful moments of my entire life have always happened in disability community. And it's not because disabled people are inherently cooler than non-disabled people, although that's debatable. It's actually because there is in disability community this acknowledgement of what Alex said earlier, that we are all bodies with needs, that we all have needs, that we all have things that make a space functional, accessible, enjoyable for us, and things that impede that enjoyment and access as well. And so anything that we need as disabled people are not special. They're not like luxury items that we're being given when other people aren't. Everyone has those needs, and centering that can really change that conversation. And so I will always do that. And in fact, even when someone is not explicitly asking me to do that, I am always kind of aware and exercising caution in trusting them to have everything thought of, you know, like especially if an institution is one that is newly dabbling in including artists with disabilities or disability art. I often am like, okay, well, did you think of this? Well, is this covered? Well, is this thing that I need to do? Okay, well, what about that? And, you know, it can feel like I'm a bossy busybody, and I am, but I also am doing that because I'm trying to think about as many people as possible being able to be in the room and like being in the room. One really nice acknowledgement of that tax that I experienced was working with the Professional Theater Arts West in, and sorry, when I say professional theater, in an acting context, I mean paid. So it means that the actors were paid and not just the staff running the space. So anyway, professional acting experience at Arts West in Seattle was that I was booked in a role, in a leading role in a play, small brag, and Bryan did one of those too. I like it. It's just like, it's on Spotify. Like, yeah, and I'm like, and I was the lead. Yeah, and they didn't have equity contracts. Equity is the stage actors union. They didn't have equity contracts available for everyone because that theater couldn't afford it. But what they said was, we would like to offer you the equity contract so that you are being paid more, because we understand that we have a lot to learn and that you are going to inherently, whether we ask you to or not, be educating us on how to make our space more accessible for everyone. And that was so cool. And that has never been done by any theater that I have worked with prior to that or since. That was in 2022. And that was really cool and changed my feelings about what was possible for me as an actor. And then I got my equity membership, and then I promptly didn't book any more equity roles. So anyway, that's that. But that's something that can be done. That's something that can be thought of, that doesn't require, pushing past your means, actually. It's just saying, oh, we have the ability to pay one person equity rates. Let's pay the person who's going to be doing an extra job. Mic drop.
Yeah.
So when I first heard this question, when Madison gave us the questions ahead of time, I wrote that there's this, I guess you could call it a pipeline of disabled artist to access worker. And it's just so common. It's like shockingly common sometimes, but like frustratingly common. I'm like, oh, you're a disabled artist. Have you done access work? Like, are you an access worker too? Oh, you're an access worker. You're also a disabled artist. And we end up just doing a little bit of it all. Like when I explain I'm a freelance access worker, I'm like, I do this, and I do this, and I do this, and I do this. But so how do I deal with this? Number one, I get paid. I think that's like the first thing is like you need to learn and in this process to say, no, I cannot give you this consultation for free. So like taking yourself seriously and getting paid. And then the other thing that I was going to say, what was it? I think that there's this idea that that we have to, okay, what am I trying to say? I'm trying to say is that hire disabled people, but also we can all do this work, and we can all do this work together. So I think that the work of access is often put on to disabled people, often for free. We're often forced into positions where we have to advocate for ourselves. And I think kind of like jumping off of what a lot of us have been talking about working collectively, I think that visual descriptions are actually a really great example of this, because this is something that I do often for museums and galleries and different kinds of spaces. It's not something I went to school for. I didn't take a class. It's just something that I just kept practicing and kept doing because I was in community that regularly used visual descriptions, and I was regularly being asked to write visual descriptions. Every time I post my work, I include visual descriptions. It just goes hand in hand. But things like this, these are things that I'm hoping that we're gonna talk a little bit about kind of this idea of a cultural shift, and I think part of that cultural shift is realizing that we all have the expertise to be part of working collaboratively towards access. I don't remember who said this, but there's this like quote that access is aspirational. And I'm gonna make this panel a lot more accessible for myself right now by ignoring the social rules and just getting up in the middle of a panel that I'm on to use the bathroom. So I will be right back.
Well, we're actually about to wrap up, so, but I know we're at time. Can you believe it, almost?
5 minutes.
We have like 5 minutes, so, but but you can go. That wasn't to discourage you. That was just so you didn't come back to an empty table.
Great example.
I can wait 5 minutes.
But I love that. Bojana or Bryan, did you have anything else that you wanted to say on this question?
Yeah, on the topic of wearing multiple hats, I think that was kind definitely something that I picked up from what she said there is there are so many things as a musician in general that you have to do. You need to do social media promotion. You need to have graphics for that. And whether you're doing it with an artist, whether you're doing it yourself by simple means, whether you're using AI to generate it now, goodness forbid, but sometimes you have to, right? In a pinch, it is a useful tool. And then you get to the venue, right? And you set up your equipment. So now you're a sound engineer, right? And you're not only setting up the equipment, but you're listening to the sound, you're EQing it, you're adjusting all of that. There's just many different hats that you wear being an artist in general, and of course, oftentimes even more, being a disabled artist. So, it's definitely a challenge to overcome, but I also love seeing, when we overcome that and working together on solutions to like these modern day issues. I don't know, I can't help it. I'm the guy that loves to solve problems and loves to come up with, be they technological or other, just solutions and, take it forward and try and innovate and take it forward, so.
I'd say being disabled, being an artist, moving through the world, I think you constantly have to be an educator. You constantly are educating people on access. You're constantly educating people on disability, like why it's important to have access, why is there a stigma attached to disability? Like, why are disabled people discriminated against? And yes, people do discriminate against disabled people. So I think like the main thing that I have felt is, just constantly having to educate people, not just on my needs and what my own access is, but like I think it's become really just about like educating people on access and disability, and like and disability culture, disability justice, disability art. And what disability aesthetics are, and moving away from like the more charitable model of disability where people are really nice to you if you're disabled, but like, they're smiling in your face, but then they really just don't do anything and they don't really invest in access. I think that teaching people that disability is access is everybody's responsibility and not just the responsibility of the disabled person. And I feel like sometimes you are saying this, you have to say the same things over and over and over again. And if you are talking to an institution and maybe there's somebody there who's been really cool and really gets access, but they leave, and then all of a sudden you have a new person, and then you have to educate that person, again on something you feel like you just got going. I think that can be really exhausting and tiring. So I think you're definitely wearing a hat as an educator as well.
Yeah. Wouldn't it be lovely to have the choice, of being brought in as just an artist, and you're like, well, you want to know how to hire ASL interpreters? Maybe you should hire somebody who can do that for you.
Yes, hire Madison.
Yeah, hire me. Tragically, I could talk to you all forever. We are at time. I just want to say thank you to everyone here. What a rich conversation. Yeah, give it up for everybody. Yes. Please.
Stay where you are. Thank you so much. So stay where you are, though, Alex. I don't want to
Yeah, okay, now
totally
I'll be right
cool.
back.
Totally cool. We're just going to, first of all, please, another round of applause for the panel. And I just wanted us to take a few minutes to, first of all, I want to lift up a couple of things that you all shared in this great discussion, and also give you all a few minutes for some questions and thoughts that you would like to share with our panel. So I really love the Care and Capacity Fund that was mentioned. I thought that was such a great idea. I'm already starting to think about folks that could fund such an initiative. I thought that was so a fantastic share there. But I just want to reiterate what you shared about transportation, because this does come up often, and especially in New Jersey, we know that it is a challenge in this state. But really, when you're doing your budgeting, really give thought to transportation reimbursement, because be proactive about the transportation. This is a practice that the Theater Alliance has done for years. We just build it in at the start of the year, rather than thinking about it or having somebody, an artist or a speaker, having to ask for it later and then having to say, oh, well, I wish I would have known, I didn't budget for it. Be proactive and budget for transportation reimbursement. It's really essential, because especially if somebody is giving up their time, maybe you can't provide them perhaps the fee that you would like to, but what you need to definitely do is you don't want somebody experiencing that out-of-pocket expense and then maybe preventing that person from engaging with you. So please build transportation reimbursement into your budgets. Also, what I've heard a lot about is it's all about collaboration and communication, right? Collaboration, communication. Have a conversation. I also love Bojana, love it. You don't want to be the access teacher. You're an artist that's hired, so you need to come to Cultural Access Network roundtables so that you and your colleagues have the education, so when you hire an artist, they're there to do what you've hired them for, to provide you with their artistry, not to serve as the educator. And if that's the role, pay them more money. I mean, that's, you're contracting them for a specific service. So really please keep that in mind. And you can never go wrong with just making sure you communicate. You have a question, no question is a silly question. Madison, I loved when you said, oh, if it's a little messy, that's okay. So I think we all try to be so perfect, but sometimes we just don't know. We just want to ask a question. We want to make it the best experience for the organization as well as the artists that we're working with. So ask questions. Don't assume, because we know what that means, right? So a couple of other things that I think would really be helpful, which might be on everyone's minds, is just in terms of job descriptions when you're posting an opportunity, and also when you're interviewing somebody with a disability, or perhaps they're coming in for an audition. What if you could just share with us a few tips for organizations just when they're thinking about job descriptions, and then also making sure that that interview and or audition, that it's a welcoming environment for the artist and arts worker. So anyone who would like to share that would be great.
I have a thought. Yeah, I would say something that I love to see. I did see it on the NJTA's General's audition page. When you click on a theater, a lot of the theaters then had their access description of what their space is like and what they offer, both for performers and for audiences in terms of access accommodations. Something that I think is really crucial is often people treat accessibility as an either-or thing, as a yes-no thing, which is really problematic, because what that does is it makes it so that disabled people, disabled artists, can't make decisions for ourselves about whether or not something might work for us. You might not think that you meet every single checkmark standard of the Americans with Disabilities Act. That doesn't mean that I might not be able to have an accessible, enjoyable experience in your building or at your organization or with your program. So actually just being descriptive and honest about what your situation is. Tell me you have 2 stairs. Tell me you have 17 stairs. None of that information is, what's the word? Superfluous. None of that doesn't matter to me or anyone else. That's something that people can think about. That's something that blind and low vision people can think about, so that as they're navigating a space, they know what to expect. Also knowing what is going to be required of you in that audition, what are access options? Are there alternatives? Do I have to do this verbally? Do I have to do this written? Do I have to sing? Do I have to speak? At what length, etc.? Really being as direct and descriptive as possible. It is a balancing act, and when in doubt, ask.
Anyone else?
I think that one of the biggest things, first of all, I love what, I love that about the descriptions, because, you know, there's a lot of venues you go to for the first time. Along with that, directions. When you're in especially a casino in Atlantic City, and there's several venues inside that casino, where is that venue? Is it on the first floor? Is it on the third floor? Do you have to go across the casino floor? Do you have to go here? Do you have to go there? Directions, very specific directions. You know, that would help, especially low vision people, but also people of other disabilities. You know, I think that would be just very helpful. As far as, you know, the job description, you know, I'm not sure exactly. I'm not sure exactly what would need to change, but I think that the main thing is the description of the venue, the directions to that specific venue, especially when it's in a large building where there's other venues. You know, and maybe even a description of the lighting conditions, that could also be helpful for various disabilities, especially low vision people. Is it dark in your venue? You know, will there be someone to guide you to that venue? Do you need that? You know, that could be a great question to be asked in a job interview. Do you need someone to guide you to the venue? Things like that.
We also, in our education to the field, we talk a lot about essential and marginal functions of a job. So these are the absolute musts, but sometimes there's pieces within a job description where an individual, you can do these essential functions really, really well, but there's a couple of things, maybe not so much, but the organization could easily make that a responsibility of somebody else because the individual is so incredible for all of the essential functions. So even commenting on if that would be helpful, just having that, again, being upfront, as you had all said. So,
when it comes to interviews, I feel like an interview is such a good opportunity to make space for someone to make space to welcome someone's needs. It shouldn't always have to be on the artist or whoever the interviewee is to kind of like to have the pressure of saying like, hey, these are my needs, and not really knowing if that is a safe space to do that. I love it when I'm given interview questions up front, because I will often have to say like, hey, I take a lot longer to process. I'm autistic. My brain just processes slowly. Like, I'm not being judged. If you want to know my actual answers to the questions, I need them ahead of time. But are you actually judging me on the speed of my processing? Because that's very ableist. So I think that an interview can just really be a great time to just like tell somebody like, hey, we welcome your access rider. And I was hoping to kind of get into access riders a little bit more today, but that's like a document. There's also other names for it. People could call it like a technical rider. But an access rider is a document that outlines just what you need to work with someone in a comfortable and safe way. And that can look like a lot of different things. But this is an opportunity for you to be like, hey, this is a space where you can tell us your needs. And that really just changes the whole vibe of how we can work together.
Yeah, this isn't my own personal story, but Right now, there's the Christine Sun Kim solo show all day, all night at the Whitney. If you're not familiar with Christine Sun Kim, they are a deaf artist. They're incredible. And their access writer is really in-depth, and part of it was if they were going to be working with the curator for the show, that the curator had to learn sign language. And so the curator who was in charge of the show did learn sign language. There was also a Deaf Culture 101 that we had actually several of those for the Whitney staff, because we knew we were going to be having a lot more deaf visitors coming in for that show, so we wanted to make sure that our staff was prepared. So, I mean, those are just a couple things that were, you know, within the, within Christine's, like, access writer. And I think that really, it made a huge difference, like, throughout the museum. It just wove in more of the deaf culture into how we approached the exhibit. And I think it really made a huge difference with a lot of the staff, just like having, you know, something like that at the forefront of how we were going to be approaching the exhibit.
That's great. I love, we talk a lot about a writer for organizations that primarily are touring to another venue. So making sure that there's a tour writer, as we call it. But I love the tech writer from the artist perspective when you're establishing that partnership with the venue. So I would love it if any of you have those, that you could send them to me, because I think that's would be extremely helpful to our field. We'll put them up in our in the resources on our website, but I've not really heard it expressed that way, a tech writer for the artist. I think that, thank you for bringing that to our attention.
Yes. Yes, that was one of the things that that I learned about as a music industry student at Rowan, and is that most, at least from what they taught us, they said most like huge artists, they have a technical writer. And the most famous story for that, I forget which artist it was, but someone had demanded in their technical writer that they have a bucket of M&Ms in their green room, and that it could have absolutely no brown ones. It was just like this hilarious thing where, you know, and they do that to make sure that the venue staff read the technical writer, so that when they get there, they can see if they actually did it. So, you know, usually the technical writer, sometimes they'll have something, you know, humorous like that in there, and they expect it too. They'll be like, you know, did you actually do it? But so, you know, I learned that from Rowan, and, you know, ever since I've had sort of a document, and on my booking page on my website, you know, for my music performances, you know, I say, please read this before filling out the booking form. You know, please just take a quick look at this. You know, and it tends to work very well. This way, it also lists all of my equipment. You know, as a legally blind person, maybe I'll forget my flash drive that goes into my keyboard with all my keyboard presets on it. Oh no. Well, okay, if the venue sees that, you know, then they'll know whose it is if they read that technical writer, right? So, you know, it's just a really handy tool, sure, and I'd be glad to send mine to you. I'm actually working on updating mine this week, no less, so once it's updated, I'll send you the brand new one. How's that?
Great, thank you.
I'm just gonna pop in really quick just to give everybody a resource. accessdocsforartists.com. accessdocsforartists.com.
Great, thank you, Alex. So we want to spend a few minutes just to hear from all of you, some questions, thoughts that you have for the panel. So, Kat, do you mind? We're going to do some mic sharing, so.
Hi, thank you. This is an amazing panel, and I learned a lot. My name is Sri Alator. I'm the founder of a theater company called the Jolly Genie Theater Company. And I work with artists with invisible disabilities. And that's what I want to hear a lot more about. It's also known as intellectual disabilities. Artists with autism, ADHD, Down syndrome. And I work with them because I find that to be an amazing population of amazing talent, which people don't see or people ignore and are not aware. And while I see an amazing panel of, people who can communicate, who are relatively amazing at communication, articulation, and, they can advocate for themselves. These artists that I work with, they cannot advocate for themselves. They cannot communicate. I work with even folks who are non-speaking artists. And that's where I'd like to learn more when I look at the panel discussion about hiring engaging artists, challenges faced, consideration for employers, expanding employment opportunities. Do you have any suggestions or words, or you come across areas where, and Alex, I know you mentioned the word autism, so I'm like, okay, at least there's someone who can understand the challenges. I'd like to hear more about what your thoughts are, and how do we help that population who are great on stage, who are amazing performers, but don't have the tools that other disabled artists have. So thank you.
I don't know if I have all of the answers. Actually, no, I'll say that differently. I know I don't have all of the answers, but I just want to make a note that because of the reality of how we perceive disability, and the concept of quote unquote visible and invisible, which is a visually centered way of thinking about disability, right? It's like, I sometimes think of like a parent and not a parent to me. Like, I interacted with them and I thought they were disabled, or I interacted with them and I didn't know they were disabled in that way. So I do think that even though you're, I'm assuming, seeing physical disabilities reflected on this panel, there are also cognitive and neurodivergence on this panel as well. I also have ADHD. I also have like extremely executive functioning affecting neurodivergence, right? And I don't know. I tend to assume that most people gathering around me are neurodivergent. And I know that Alex did speak to being autistic as well, and processing time and things like that. And I think that a big thing for me is not assuming how someone can and wants to communicate with you, and also not assuming that if someone is not communicating with you in the way that you're used to, that they're not communicating, or that they're not working really hard, or that they're not present, or as you said, that they're not brilliant and talented, right? So I think actually just being ready with a kind of availability of actually, yeah, care and capacity, really, like being available to work with someone on how they can approach the problem that you have set in front of them, if it's a problem. I guess I think of approaching a character in a play as a kind of problem, right? That we want, a puzzle we want to solve. And I do really think that collaboration comes into that a lot. Also understanding that if someone has a personal care attendant or a family member who is their access person, that is not an additional thing, that is not like something to think of as an extra luxury. I keep talking about luxury, I don't know. Not to think of as an extra thing, but that is something that should be thought of as a part of what an artist is coming with and a part of what an artist needs. So actually being forward with that, having budget for that, as well as asking, hey, is it just you, or do you have a team that you come with? I have a friend who is physically and mentally disabled, and she travels always with her mom and her sister. Both of them are her access people. So yeah, that's that. Thank you for that question. I appreciate it.
Can I piggyback off that?
Yeah.
Yeah, so full disclaimer, I also have ADHD. It's also part of what helps me to rock out in the ways that I do to Billy Joel, Elton John, and country on stage and have an absolute blast doing it. But anyway, to address the question at hand here, I think that just like John said earlier, collaboration and communication. If the disability of, whatever that is, the invisible disability that doesn't allow the artist to, communicate or advocate for themselves, communicating that in the technical writer, would be a very important step in my opinion, because that document is what that venue is going to look at when they, after the interview is done, after you've been accepted, right? Or when you're booking that person, right? That's when that gets submitted traditionally. So, including that information in that document so that the venue staff are aware, okay, there's a disability here that you can't see. This person needs, this help, but they're amazing on stage. That kind of communication in the technical rider can be very important. I also love what you said, Neve, about, assistants or people going with you. I put that in my technical rider as well. That I always have at least 1 or 2 people. Please provide seating for those people. If there is food at the venue, you don't have to provide that. You can, it's optional. But seriously, I put all of that in my technical rider so that they're aware, okay, it's not just going to be, Bryan the performer, there's going to also be some other people with him, exactly what John said earlier, collaboration, communication, letting people know up front. It's definitely a solution.
Hi. One, thank you so much. And I this may be a stupid question, but I just want to make sure that there's that balance point between communication and not relying on people to be the educators for the room. So how would one either ask those questions and how to approach those moments so that you're not the educators, but also get the information that we might need, or what ways can we do that? But then, I don't know. The question's in there somewhere. I've been trying to figure out how to say it for like the last, 3 or 4 minutes. But what are the ways that we can make sure that you're staying safe and doing the job of being an artist without stepping over that boundary, but still ask the questions that we might need to get so that things happen smoothly?
I frequently am answering. So I don't know. Does people down there want to answer?
I just wanted to follow up on the last question really quick. And maybe I can say something about this question as well. Because I just think that this phrase, to presume competence, is really important. I think that this society, when people see people who stim in big ways, maybe make sounds that others might deem as like inappropriate or are nonverbal, et cetera, there's this assumption of lack of competence. So I just think that it's really important to uplift just this phrase, presuming competence, and also valuing all forms of communication. And we haven't touched yet in this time on like sensory access. So when we are collectively working towards making our spaces friendly and accessible, we can also kind of think about our environment, like what are the loud sounds in our spaces? What is the lighting? Are we providing STEM toys? Are we ready to take the time to slow down and listen to someone who's using a different communication device? So that's just really important for me. And then I guess, so now like bringing it back to the current question of like, how do we, I think the question is like, how do we ask the artists that we're working with for like, what do they need without putting them in the position of an educator? Is that the question? Okay, cool. Maybe other people have different takes on this. I would love to hear it. I think for me, that just the act of offering space, I think it would be a really amazing thing to, for example, if I was working with a new space, for the space to approach me and say like, hey, do you have an access rider? If you don't know what that is, like, here's an example. Feel free to submit one if you want, no pressure. Or we could like do a Zoom and you could talk about what you might need, or just like send me an email with like what you need in one sentence, like making it flexible, kind of just like opening up that space rather than saying, but also like opening up that space for everybody, not just putting like the disabled artist on the spot. kind of just bringing it like more into the culture of the space. I guess that's like a starting point.
Yeah, and I think also if you are going to be inviting disabled artists to participate, like make sure you're ready to do that. You know, I think that what happens, you know, sometimes is like, oh yeah, okay, we want to focus on accessibility. We're going to invite these disabled artists, and there isn't any real preparedness. There isn't. You know, I think that the access maybe isn't there yet, and I think that it's really important to make sure that you are prepared, that you have educated yourself and your staff. You don't want to have disabled artists or visitors coming and having a terrible experience. Like, I think it's really more important to get to the point where you are ready to have disabled artists and visitors come. And then to invite them to participate or to visit. So I think just being prepared, educating yourself and your staff is really important.
And to speak to, sorry, Bryan, thank you. To speak to the idea of being prepared, I appreciate that point, Bojana, because I think that there is a way. And also the idea of, as Alex said, offering space. There's a way to let someone know that you actually want them to be there and that they're not the first disabled person that you've like heard of or like are consulting at all or like met, like, you know, like I can generally clock the difference between someone who just like emerged from Iraq and was like, other people can't move. What? You know, that's one way to understand things. And then there's like, okay, I might not know every single thing that you need because I don't know you personally, but I have done this reading. Is that relevant to you? I have done this research. So just actually when you're offering space to someone to share and when you're asking questions, kind of putting forward, what is the work that you have done? Can you share with me the work that you've done so that I know that I am not the first person that you've ever spoken to about this? Because I think that that can really establish trust in a different way and makes me think like, okay, the questions that you're asking are the ones that you didn't have answered by doing that research. There are actually like publications out now that are about accessibility and disability justice and how many different kinds of disabled people approach those things. And I never want to be like totally flippant and be like, Google it, but because I really, but also literally do that as well. But because I do really appreciate the question about like, how can I honestly ask the questions that I have? How can I honestly communicate and not make assumptions, but also not force someone to be an educator of me? And I think it's really about a kind of seesaw, a kind of balance, because it's about us as disabled artists feeling safe and having room to advocate for ourselves and knowing what even advocacy looks like, sounds like, feels like. But it's also about knowing that other people who maybe aren't disabled or think they're not disabled or aren't disabled yet are really are actually invested in that, in creating that culture in that space.
We have time for just one more question.
Okay.
Hi, thank you so much for the conversation. I really appreciate all your insights. And I was wondering, because I have worked with an artist that had he has autism, so he constantly ran into the difficulty of being judged by his processing speed, but at the same time, he wasn't willing to have those conversations with the institutions that he might have had interviews with. So I wonder, I wanted to kind of maybe invite an additional thought as to how we can create conversations in which I understand that it's not the other person's maybe responsibility to be an educator, but rather how can we navigate being an educator, and when can be an educator can become empowering, and when it can become more of disempowering?
I think if you're getting paid to be an educator, that can be, more empowering. I think it's when there's the expectation to be an educator, but that hasn't been specifically, said to the artist, and or it hasn't been outlined in some way that they would be getting paid, because I think what is important is to value the two separate things. And I think John said something about this, and we've been talking about this, that if you're going to be an artist, get paid to be the artist. If you're going to be an educator, get paid to be the educator. So I think that just having that understanding is really important. And when you're bringing somebody in, instead of what happens is, this is just the assumption that you're going to educate, and we're just going to let you do that, but we're not going to pay you for that. I think that is when it becomes an issue.
I agree. And I also think that I can't speak to this individual artist's experience, but I do know that something I've observed is that a lot of times the unwillingness to have a certain kind of conversation about how you're being perceived as a disabled artist, how you're being judged, how you're being assessed, is not having a foundation of trust to be able to think that you'll even be safe in that conversation, to think that that conversation will not be weaponized against you later. Or maybe it's just not a conversation that you enjoy. And so you need to be around more disabled people that are sharing experiences with you. I know for me, I didn't want to talk about accessibility or my needs or all of the ways that I'm disabled other than just not being able to walk so good. I didn't want to engage with that until I was in the San Francisco Bay Area, surrounded by people, some of whom were more profoundly disabled than me. And I was all of a sudden hitting the ground, crawling real fast, realizing how much I had to learn and how much I needed to work to be present and accommodating for my friends and comrades. And I think that it can't be underestimated how much having a context and a ground of being for those conversations matters. I think when you're just an isolated person, as so many disabled people are, when you don't even know that disability culture exists because the world wants to tell us that it doesn't, you end up feeling like when you're asked to speak about those things, you're being asked to speak about a problem that you have, as opposed to a way that you live and are. And so I had to make a lot of assumptions about the experience of that person. I don't know, but those are thoughts I have about that.
My sort of thoughts during this whole conversation, about educating, we're talking about educating sort of venue personnel, right, or managers, of the artist's disability, right? It's a really challenging topic because, as I have stated earlier today, the arts are very competitive fields: music, theater, visual arts, other arts. These are very competitive fields, and so, in the interview, right? They'll interview an artist, right? Be they disabled or not, and they'll say, all right, we want this person, okay, we don't want this person, and they don't have to provide the reason why. So, in my opinion, first of all, for artists that can't, advocate for themselves, right, then, what knowledge can we turn to submit to these venue owners so that they can, get the education that they need to take on this artist into their roster, right, of people. But for those that can, how can we improve ourselves to advocate for ourselves and our needs? Because, I'm very fortunate and thankful to be a professional performer in Tropicana, Atlantic City. I have one gig right now, one night a week. I'm looking for more, and I've been looking for a while. It's pretty hard to get a recurring gig down in South Jersey. And I don't even mention my disability most of the time until I submit that technical rider, and then I'm like, okay, listen, I'm a legally blind person. There are certain needs that I have, and I try to communicate them very clearly. But up front, I don't even present it, because I want to be competitive in the field, and maybe this is a very touchy subject for some. It's definitely a part of who I am, but I definitely don't feel that it fully defines who I am. And so, the thing that defines me as who I am is the piano player, the vocalist, the songwriter, the producer, the live sound engineer. That's how I want to be thought of. And the fact that I'm legally blind and that, I work with everything I've got every day to overcome those challenges. That's what I want people to see.
So we could go on for, this has been such a great conversation, but we're keeping you between your lunch. But as we close out this portion of the program, I just wanted to ask Madison if you just had some closing thoughts before we do some housekeeping.
I just want to say, well, I'm blown away by all of the answers, and I was also thinking a lot about maybe the last two questions, and it seems like the people are trying to differentiate of like where that intangible line is between like relationship access, where you and I are collaborating on access together for maybe you specifically, and forcing someone into doing their own access work, or thrusting them into an access role. And I think the key there, a lot of people have said where it's like building that foundation, building that trust. I think there's a huge difference of when access is treated like an invitation versus treated as a problem that is rooted in your body. And so again, leading with like, here's what we have available. What else do you want? What else do you need, right? Like an excited invitation is very different than, okay, so can you do a training with our staff? Or, or Bojana was talking about Christine Sun-Kim's rider. There's a difference of like, okay, in the rider it says our curator needs to learn American Sign Language. Are you going to teach that to her? There's just, those are like silly examples because they're so hyperbolic, but there's just like a very different line of like, oh, I'm already in the work, I'm already doing the work, and now I'm adding that extra layer of access that is relationship-wise versus we don't know what we don't know, so why don't you tell us everything about access right now? You do know? That's all I wanted to kind of maybe contribute.
Thanks, Madison. And a round of applause again for this great panel. Thank you all so much. So probably from today's conversation, some thoughts percolated, some things you want to learn more about. As you know, next year we'll start up our series of our virtual roundtables, and we're always looking for ideas and topics from the field. So please email myself, Kat, or Lindsay. We definitely want to hear from all of you about some topics that maybe you don't have enough information on, or maybe something that we've offered before that you would want to do a deeper dive in. I think we definitely want to do more conversation around employment, because I do think that is really important, because as somebody said, we focus a lot on our audiences and visitors, but this is equally important. So I'm thinking to myself, more conversations in this area. But please, we do want to hear from you. You're always such a big help in helping the committee form those roundtable discussions. So now some quick, this part of the program is over. Now I bet your stomachs are rumbling, right? So we're going to go right to the left, around the corner, into the other gallery for lunch. It is open seating. There are a few tables with a reserved sign, but for the most part, it is open seating. So please go in the other gallery, get some lunch, and we'll continue with the recognition program in a little while. Thank you so much. Thank you.